Today, we share with each other a topic about the meaning of life, what constitutes life's values, and why we must live for them. This direction, this continuous red thread throughout our lives that people often call a life philosophy, does it exist? Is there a fundamental reason for us to live? A philosophy that guides our living. This forms the foundation that directs our life's path. You know that education lacks consistent direction. This direction comes from having a continuous guiding thread throughout one's life. In academic terms, they call it a life philosophy. In everyday language, it's choosing a reason to live. In business terms, people call it core values. These are all roughly the same thing. They're similar concepts. So when we find a common voice, a shared guiding thread, consider this. When two people come together in marriage to have children, if we share this common thread throughout life, is this family more likely to face conflicts or find happiness? Note this carefully. Everything else is just methodology. For instance, whatever profession you choose is simply a method of earning money. One person chooses this profession, another chooses that one. These are just methods for building our homes. But what foundation is this home built upon? What gives it its deeper meaning? We've never been taught this, never been trained in it. This is because, fundamentally, the educational foundation across our entire nation lacks this element. This aspect has already become faded. That's why you'll notice that our education system keeps struggling to find its core values, struggling to find its educational philosophy. To reach this understanding, it took me approximately 20 years after graduating from university. Actually, I had been searching for these answers since 10th grade. Even then, I was curious about these matters. I had read extensively about them. Books about human nature, psychology, philosophy, and ethics. I read all this in 10th grade, but I didn't understand it. Everything remained hazy. Later, when I started working, I searched even more intensively. Eventually, around the age of 40, things became clear. I had glimpses of understanding before, but they were always fuzzy. It only became truly clear around 40. After 40, I finally systematized it into a teaching curriculum. Our school teachers started attending, and then the parents joined the classes too. After the parents joined, teachers brought their family members, and parents brought their relatives and friends. Back then, one of my training courses would take 4 to 5 months to complete, with just one session per week. There were assignments every week. About 20 sessions in total, if you break it down with 4 sessions per week. Wouldn't 20 sessions take 5 months? After those 5 months concluded, I discovered something interesting. While we started with 100 people, we ended with about 90 people. After 5 months, the proportion of outside participants grew larger than internal staff. Initially, I conducted internal training with 70% internal staff. But after 5 months, the internal participation dropped to 50%, sometimes even 40%. Meanwhile, the number of external participants kept growing. From this, I discovered something. People working internally in education don't necessarily love philosophy. They happen to take the teaching exam, applied to our school system, and for whatever reason, passed the interview. They attended training with the mindset of being forced to learn. Because they were our teachers, they felt compelled to attend rather than privileged to learn. Outside participants came to learn because they wanted to, voluntarily gathering together and choosing to attend. Even though the fee was modest, just around $20 to $30, they kept coming. They approached learning with an active mindset, whereas internal staff learned with a passive attitude. These two psychological states were fundamentally different. When I reflected on the system, I realized that people without education degrees or teaching certificates who entered the education field often performed better than those with teaching degrees. This was because they dared to sacrifice their careers. They had stable jobs outside education for 10 to 15 years, but left those positions to switch to teaching. Their determination and passion were typically immense. After just a few years, they caught up, and around the 5-year mark, they significantly surpassed their more experienced colleagues. We see this phenomenon among scientists too. Take Louis Pasteur, who was a chemist, not a medical professional, yet he was honored in the medical field. Vaccines belong to medicine, not chemistry. Similarly, Maria Montessori was a doctor, but she was celebrated in education. And countless others followed similar paths. In Vietnam, there is a renowned general recognized worldwide, General Von Nguyen Giap. Despite never attending any military academy, he was originally a history teacher who earned great acclaim in military affairs. His success came from his passionate study of historical battles, researching thousands of years of ancient warfare. His passion and determination proved far more powerful than any 4-year formal training program. 4 years is nothing in a lifetime. What's 4 years compared to 80? It's just 5% of your life. And within that 5%, how much is actually devoted to your specialty? You study various subjects but end up teaching just one. So we're looking at maybe 1% of true specialization. Can we really call that expertise? Meanwhile, passionate individuals dedicate 90% of their lives to their field, investing everything into it. Even without formal degrees, they achieve far greater mastery. When I understood this, I looked at successful people and discovered a pattern. When they switched from career A to career B, they succeeded rapidly because they carried over a universal formula. They applied this formula to new fields with passion and determination. Within a few years, they became leaders in their new domains. On average, it took them just 2 to 3 years to become experts in their new fields. Compare 2 to 3 years of self-directed, deep learning versus 4 years of university education. Which is more effective? Deep, focused learning for 2 to 3 years can yield 3 to 5 times the expertise. Global statistics show that online university students become 3 times more successful than their offline counterparts after 10 years post-graduation. Why? Online learners are self-motivated, with no professors hovering nearby. They must independently power up their computers, solve problems, and search for solutions when stuck. Meanwhile, classroom students often think, the professor will explain it later, or I'll just ask a classmate. This mindset inadvertently prevents self-development. Let's not fear changing careers or stepping outside our field of study. Schools fail to teach perhaps the most crucial subject, the meaning of life. This explains why many young people today feel lost and directionless. Even after landing jobs and earning salaries, many feel empty inside. Why? Because we were never taught about life's deeper dimensions or the nature of consciousness. What is the common thread that connects us to life? What gives life true meaning? During my 5 years studying engineering, not one professor spoke about life's purpose, character, or ethics. Every class focused purely on technical skills, drawing and design class, calculations in statistics, machine blueprints in manufacturing. Everything aimed at earning a living, but never addressed how to live meaningfully. After 5 years, with thousands of students graduating, how many developed strong character? Very few. This is what's missing in our education system. One subject meant to build character is civic education, which was originally called ethics, but lost this meaningful name. What does civic education teach? Following traffic rules and obeying laws. But is this truly ethics? Does keeping to the right side of the road or following laws make someone ethical? Not necessarily. People follow rules out of fear of punishment, not ethical conviction. Civic education falls short because it teaches ethics from the outside in, imposing rules to follow without internal acceptance. So when someone encounters a person with a broken leg on an empty street with no traffic lights, they might remain indifferent. Why? Because according to civic education, helping or not helping are equally valid choices. It's the police's job. This creates emotional detachment. Many people, including civic education teachers, mistakenly believe their subject is sufficient for moral education, but it never is. True ethics works from the inside out. It requires good thoughts, kindness, and sincerity within, which then naturally manifests in ethical behavior. Teaching ethics from the outside in is dangerous. This morning, we will explore both approaches, from the outside in and from the inside out. How can we awaken our inner self in the quickest and most effective way? This is also one of the ways through which we can recognize our core character and understand the meaning of life. To see the meaning of life, we first need the capacity to see, the ability to understand issues, to observe them keenly and identify them deeply. To observe and recognize properly, you must be like a bright light. If you're just a dim light, how can you observe? Thus, wisdom must be bright. There's no other way. Whatever path you take or whatever you do, I may not know, but if you can't see issues clearly, you'll never find life's meaning. You must see both brightly and deeply. Fortunately, this is something that can be trained and achieved. That's why right view is wisdom itself. Without the light of wisdom, we'll make all sorts of mistakes. You can become a benevolent person. But if that benevolence lacks the guiding light of wisdom, it might actually lead to harm. It's common for a good person to become harmful after 5 years due to misunderstandings. One mistake can lead to harmful actions. To gain clarity, we must first develop critical thinking, examining issues from multiple angles. Accepting things at face value is superstition. Being overly trusting shows naivety. When presented with one perspective, we must look for other dimensions. If someone shows one side, we should seek the other 3. For example, a book has 4 sides. If someone only presents one side, what about the other 3? In business, particularly in sales, salespeople typically highlight just 1 or 2 positive features of a product, while ignoring its drawbacks. We only discover these other aspects after purchasing the product. By then it's too late. The sale is final, and there's no returning it. So we must learn to view things from multiple angles and question even what we're learning. As an enlightened one said 2,600 years ago, don't believe something just because it's passed down orally, traditional, or widely rumored. We have the right to question even this curriculum and what we're hearing. But doubt serves 2 purposes. We can doubt to understand more deeply, or doubt to create distance. In life, doubt often leads to separation. Think about it. When a husband comes home late, what's the purpose of your suspicion? Isn't it just creating cracks in your relationship and leading to arguments? In meetings, we doubt others out of jealousy. When someone gives a good report, we question it and criticize not to build something constructive, but to assert our own ego and overshadow others. So this concept of don't believe immediately encourages us to investigate and clarify matters. When someone presents one perspective, we shouldn't rush to believe it. We don't need to deny their view, just withhold immediate belief and observe other perspectives. Only when we've seen all 4 sides and synthesized them should we believe. In Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha tells the story of blind men touching an elephant. The first touches the leg and says it's like a temple pillar. The second touches the ear and claims it's like a fan. The third touches the trunk and says it's like a leech. And the fourth touches the belly and declares it's like a boat. They argue endlessly because each only perceives one aspect. Our task isn't to critique others, but to listen without rushing to believe. Listen deeply, observe keenly, then synthesize everything to gain a comprehensive view. This concept of don't believe doesn't mean questioning in a jealous way like, where did you go? Who were you with? Why did you go drinking? Questions filled with envy and jealousy. The more you ask such questions, the more suspicion you create. The faster the relationship deteriorates, so we must be mindful of this. Now let's revisit the concept of doubt, which means don't believe. Addiction is commonly understood as the consequence of chemical dependency on substances like heroin or cocaine. This perspective originated from experiments in the early 20th century, where rats were isolated in cages and given access to 2 water bottles, one with plain water and another laced with heroin or cocaine. Almost invariably, the rats would choose the drug-laced water, drinking continuously until death. However, in the 1970s, Professor Bruce Alexander discovered a crucial factor that previous experiments had overlooked: the living environment. He created a rat park, a comfortable environment equipped with toys, slides, and other rats for social interaction. In this setting, rats rarely drank the drug-laced water, and none became addicted or overdosed. This demonstrated that the living environment, not just chemical effects, plays a crucial role in determining addictive behavior. This experiment proved relevant not only for rats but also for humans. During the Vietnam War, 20% of American soldiers used heroin, raising concerns about a potential addiction epidemic after the war ended. However, 95% of these soldiers quit heroin without rehabilitation upon returning home. When reunited with family and friends, they no longer needed heroin to cope with loneliness or stress. This demonstrates that addiction isn't merely a chemical issue, but is deeply connected to environment and relationships. Humans have a natural instinct to connect. When we're happy and healthy, we connect with those around us. However, when wounded, isolated, or experiencing failure, we often turn to sources of temporary comfort like phones, pornography, gambling, drugs, or anything addictive. In fact, since 1950, the average number of close friends for Americans has decreased significantly, while living spaces have grown larger. Modern society promotes isolation and prioritizes material possessions over relationships. The war on drugs over the past century has only worsened the situation. Instead of supporting addicts' recovery, we marginalize them, making it difficult for them to find work, cutting off their benefits, and ultimately imprisoning them, a literal cage. To address addiction, we need to change our approach. Rather than focusing on punishment and control, we need to create a supportive environment that connects people. Similar to Professor Alexander's rat park, this requires building healthy relationships and rediscovering the value of social connection. The opposite of addiction isn't moderation, it's connection.